"You're not authorized to be on this floor." The words cracked across the executive hallway just seconds after Ethan Walker opened a door he never meant to touch. Every head turned. The security supervisor frowned. A woman in a charcoal business suit looked at him as if he had wandered into the wrong world. And standing inside the glass-walled conference room was the CEO herself. No one cared that Ethan had been responding to an emergency maintenance call. No one cared that he was carrying a toolbox, not a briefcase. In that moment, he was just a single dad in a faded work shirt who had accidentally walked into the most important meeting in the building. The silence that followed felt heavier than the steel wrench hanging from his belt. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly, not in shame, but in respect. "Sorry, ma'am," he said calmly. "Wrong door." He stepped back immediately, already turning away before anyone could accuse him of making excuses. A few quiet chuckles followed him down the corridor. One executive shook his head. "Unbelievable." Another muttered, "That's why maintenance should stay in the service areas." Ethan said nothing. He simply continued walking. Real dignity rarely argues with people determined to misunderstand it. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows of Kingsley Dynamics Tower. The city traffic crawled below, while fluorescent lights reflected across polished marble floors. Ethan returned to the mechanical room and set his toolbox beside a humming air handler. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter. "Don't forget parent night, Dad." He smiled despite the morning. Never. At noon, he sat alone in the employee break room, eating a turkey sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Beside him lay an overdue utility bill folded neatly inside an envelope. Across the room, two younger workers discussed promotions. "Management trainee program opens today," one said. "Good benefits. Company car eventually." Ethan glanced toward the flyer pinned beside the vending machines. He had submitted an application months ago. The rejection email arrived that morning. Not selected. No interview. No discussion. Nothing. A janitor pushed a cart past the doorway. A microwave beeped. Someone laughed at a sports podcast playing from a phone speaker. Ethan folded the rejection notice and placed it inside his lunch bag. Then he quietly returned to work. Responsibility did not stop because disappointment showed up. That afternoon, a receptionist called maintenance about recurring power fluctuations near the executive floor. Ethan arrived carrying diagnostic equipment older than some of the interns working upstairs. Within minutes, he located the problem hidden inside a distribution panel. A loose transfer relay. Small issue. Potentially massive consequences. He documented everything carefully and submitted the report. The young facilities manager barely glanced at it. "You worry too much, Ethan." "Maybe," Ethan replied. "But this one should be replaced today." The manager shrugged. "We'll get to it next quarter." Ethan nodded and moved on. He never learned how to force people to listen. He only learned how to do the job right. Later that evening, his aging Ford pickup rattled into the parking lot of Jefferson Elementary School. Children hurried through the school hallway, carrying science projects and poster boards. Parents filled the building with conversations and tired smiles. Ethan spotted his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, standing beside her classroom display. Her face brightened immediately. "You came. Told you I would." She wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, the burdens of overdue bills, missed opportunities, and long shifts faded into the background. Her teacher greeted him warmly. "Lily says you helped her build the entire solar system model." Ethan smiled. "She did most of it." "Actually," the teacher said, lowering her voice, "the wiring design was impressive. Most parents wouldn't know how to do that." Ethan glanced toward the project. Tiny lights illuminated each planet in sequence with remarkable precision. "Just something I learned a long time ago." The teacher looked curious. Before she could ask more, Ethan changed the subject and helped Lily pack her things. On the drive home, they stopped at a small diner off Route 41. The neon sign buzzed softly above the entrance. Lily colored on a paper placemat, while Ethan studied the menu prices more carefully than he wanted her to notice. "Dad," she asked. "Yeah." "Did something bad happen today?" Ethan looked out the window toward the darkening parking lot. "Nothing we can't handle." She accepted the answer because she trusted him. Most people did not. As they left the diner, Ethan's phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar executive extension from Kingsley Dynamics. He almost ignored it. Almost. Then he answered. The voice on the other end sounded tense. Mr. Walker? This is the CEO's office. Ms. Lauren Kingsley would like to speak with you first thing tomorrow morning. Ethan stopped walking. Across the street, headlights swept through the rain. Beside him, Lily squeezed his hand. And for the first time all day, Ethan felt the faint sensation that something far bigger than a wrong door in a maintenance report had just begun. That night, Ethan barely slept. The rain continued tapping against the windows of the small rental house he shared with Lily on the edge of town. At 6 o'clock the next morning, he was already in the kitchen packing her lunch. A peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a handwritten note folded neatly beside a napkin. Lily wondered and rubbing her eyes. Ethan had already reviewed the monthly budget twice before sunrise. The overdue utility bill still sat on the counter. The numbers had not magically changed overnight. Neither had the responsibilities. Yet when Lily smiled at him over a bowl of cereal, he folded the bill and slipped it into a drawer. Children deserved breakfast before burdens. The old Ford pickup groaned as they drove toward Jefferson Elementary. School buses rolled through damp neighborhoods. American flags fluttered outside storefronts opening for the day. When they reached the school hallway, Lily stopped and hugged him tightly. Good luck with your meeting, Dad. Ethan smiled. Good luck with your math test. He waited until she disappeared into her classroom before returning to the truck. Most people saw a maintenance worker. Lily saw something else entirely. By 8 o'clock, Ethan stood once again inside Kingsley Dynamics Tower. The executive assistant escorted him upstairs without explanation. Employees glanced at him as he passed. A few recognized him as the man who had accidentally interrupted the executive meeting. Their expressions carried the same quiet judgment as before. The assistant stopped outside a conference room. Please wait here. Through the glass walls, Ethan noticed engineers, consultants, and senior managers gathered around architectural drawings. He recognized several technical diagrams immediately. More interestingly, he spotted multiple errors. He said nothing. 10 minutes later, Lauren Kingsley entered. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Mr. Walker. Ethan stood. Mom. She studied him for a moment. You submitted a facilities report yesterday regarding a transfer relay. Yes. My engineering department reviewed it this morning. Ethan simply waited. Lauren crossed her arms. They said the concern was exaggerated. Ethan nodded once. They may be right. The answer seemed to surprise her. No defensiveness. No attempt to prove himself. Just calm acceptance. And what do you think? She asked. Ethan looked toward the rain-covered skyline outside the window. I think electrical systems do not care about opinions. For the first time, something almost resembling amusement touched her expression. Before she could respond, a facilities director entered carrying a folder. Sorry to interrupt. We have a problem. The room's atmosphere changed instantly. Overnight fluctuations had triggered failures in part of the building's backup network. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. But expensive. Very expensive. Lauren turned toward Ethan. The director looked irritated. Why is he here? Ethan ignored the comment. He'd spent years learning that respect was not something you demanded. Sometimes it was something you quietly practiced, even when others refused to return it. While executives debated, Ethan noticed a maintenance technician struggling with diagnostic data on a tablet. He walked over and gently pointed to a sequence of readings. Try comparing those numbers against yesterday's load profile. The technician blinked. Seconds later, his eyes widened. Wait, this changes everything. Ethan stepped back immediately. No credit, no speech, just help. Lauren watched the entire exchange. Something in her gaze shifted, only slightly. Curiosity replacing dismissal. Later that afternoon, Ethan stopped at a grocery store on his way home. He carefully compared prices aisle by aisle before placing milk, bread, and pasta into his cart. His phone buzzed. An email from Human Resources had arrived. He opened it expecting another rejection. Instead, he found a short message requesting his presence at a special executive review the following morning. No explanation, no agenda, just a time and location. Ethan stared at the screen while shoppers pushed carts past him under fluorescent lights. Across town, someone had finally started asking questions. And for reasons he could not yet understand, the answers seemed to be leading directly toward him. The next morning, Ethan arrived 15 minutes early. That was his habit, not because anyone noticed, but because responsibility had a way of becoming part of a person after enough years. The executive review was being held on the 32nd floor, far above the maintenance corridors and mechanical rooms where he normally spent his days. Through the glass walls, the city stretched beneath a gray spring sky. Coffee cups rested beside laptops. Senior managers exchanged confident greetings. Ethan stood quietly near the back of the room in his clean work shirt, feeling every bit as out of place as the first day he had accidentally opened the wrong door. A few people glanced at him with visible confusion. One executive whispered, "Why is maintenance attending this meeting?" Ethan pretended not to hear. Sometimes dignity meant allowing other people to reveal themselves. The meeting began with discussions about the ongoing electrical instability affecting several company facilities. Charts filled the screens. Consultants proposed expensive solutions. The conversation circled for nearly an hour. Then Lauren Kingsley looked toward Ethan. "Mr. Walker, you reviewed these systems personally. What were we missing?" The room fell silent. Several executives exchanged skeptical looks. Ethan studied the diagrams for a moment before answering. "The problem is not where everyone is looking." He stepped toward the screen. His voice remained calm. No performance. No attempt to impress. He pointed to a seemingly unrelated section of the infrastructure network. "The failures begin here, then travel through the backup load sequence." A few engineers frowned. One immediately disagreed. Another shook his head. Yet Lauren noticed something unusual. Ethan was not defending a theory. He was explaining an observation. There was a difference. 20 minutes later, a verification team confirmed his assessment. The room grew noticeably quieter. Nobody apologized. People rarely did. But several faces changed. Respect often arrived before words. After the meeting, Lauren found Ethan waiting for the elevator. "How did you catch that?" she asked. Ethan shrugged lightly. "I've been maintaining systems a long time." That answer leaves out quite a bit. For the first time, a faint smile touched Ethan's face. Most things do. The elevator doors opened. Before either could say more, Ethan's phone rang. His expression changed immediately. Lauren noticed it. "Everything okay?" Ethan listened for a moment, then nodded. "My daughter forgot her science project at home." Without hesitation, he stepped aside and called a coworker to cover part of his shift. 30 minutes later, his old Ford pickup was crossing town toward Jefferson Elementary. The project sat carefully secured on the passenger seat. The same solar system display with its precise electrical wiring. When Ethan arrived, the school hallway buzzed with students changing classes. He delivered the project just before judging began. Lily's face lit up with relief. "I thought I ruined everything." Ethan knelt beside her. One mistake does not ruin everything. The words seemed simple, but they carried the weight of experience. As he left the classroom, he noticed another parent struggling with a collapsed display board in the hallway. Without being asked, Ethan spent 10 minutes quietly helping repair it before returning to work. No one applauded. No one needed to. Later that afternoon, Lauren received a report from one of the engineers who had challenged Ethan during the meeting. The engineer sounded unsettled. "I checked his recommendations from the last 6 months." Lauren looked up, and almost every one of them was right. She leaned back slowly. Outside her office window, traffic moved through downtown streets while delivery trucks unloaded near a grocery store across the block. For the second time in 2 days, she found herself thinking about a maintenance worker who never seemed interested in proving himself. Most people chased recognition. Ethan Walker seemed content simply carrying responsibility wherever he found it. Yet the more Lauren learned, the less the picture made sense. Then her assistant entered carrying a personnel file. "You may want to see this." Lauren opened the folder. Her eyes stopped on a section that should not have belonged to an ordinary maintenance worker. And as she continued reading, a completely new question began to form. Who exactly had been working in her building all this time? Lauren sat alone in her office long after most of the executives had gone home. The personnel file remained open on her desk beneath the glow of a brass reading lamp. Outside, downtown traffic drifted through the evening rain, while reflections shimmered across the glass walls of Kingsley Dynamics Tower. The file raised more questions than answers. Ethan Walker had completed advanced technical certifications years earlier. Not unusual. What caught her attention was the pattern. Specialized infrastructure training, project leadership coursework, emergency systems design credentials. The kind of qualifications normally attached to people occupying corner offices, not mechanical rooms. Yet the employment history contained significant gaps. Entire chapters seemed missing. Lauren closed the folder slowly. A person did not accidentally collect that kind of knowledge. The next morning, she arrived to discover a new problem. A major client was visiting headquarters to evaluate a multi-million-dollar facilities contract. Executives rushed through preparations. Presentation screens were tested. Catering arrived. Employees hurried through hallways carrying coffee from the diner across the street. Then one of the senior directors entered Lauren's office looking frustrated. The client requested a technical walkthrough. Lauren looked up, and the engineer assigned to lead it called in sick. Silence followed. Then Lauren made an unexpected decision. Have Ethan do it. The director stared at her. The maintenance worker? The emphasis was impossible to miss. Yes, that would be a mistake. Lauren found herself irritated by the certainty in his voice. Why? Because clients expect experts. The irony lingered in the room. By noon, Ethan found himself walking through the facility with a group of visiting executives. He wore the same work shirt he always wore. No title, no authority, no special introduction. Yet, as questions emerged, he answered each one with quiet precision. Energy efficiency, backup systems, infrastructure resilience, maintenance forecasting. He never spoke longer than necessary. He never tried to impress anyone. He simply explained what he knew. Several visitors appeared increasingly engaged. One even began taking notes. But not everyone was pleased. After the tour, the senior director who had opposed the idea confronted Lauren. He overstepped. Ow! He made the engineering department look bad. Lauren looked toward the conference room, where Ethan was already returning equipment carts to storage. Or perhaps he made someone else look unprepared. The director walked away unhappy. For the first time, Lauren noticed something uncomfortable. The more capable Ethan appeared, the more resistance seemed to follow him. Later that afternoon, Ethan stopped by a neighborhood grocery store before heading home. He compared prices carefully, calculating every dollar. In the parking lot, he noticed an elderly woman struggling to load bags into her sedan. Without hesitation, he carried them for her. She thanked him warmly. Ethan simply smiled and wished her a good evening. Small acts of kindness rarely appeared on resumes. Yet they often revealed more about a person than titles ever could. When he finally reached home, Lily was sitting at the kitchen table working on homework. Beside her sat another envelope from the utility company. Ethan glanced at it, but focused on helping her solve a math problem first. Priorities mattered. Later that night, while Lily slept, Ethan opened the bill and quietly began adjusting next month's budget. Across town, Lauren was doing something unusual herself. She had requested access to archived company records. Not because she distrusted Ethan. Quite the opposite. The more she learned, the less she understood. Then, shortly before midnight, an old project report appeared on her screen. A report from years ago. Her eyes widened as she read the author line. Ethan Walker. Not maintenance staff. Not support personnel. Something entirely different. Yet before she could learn more, the document access abruptly terminated. The file had been sealed, and suddenly the mystery surrounding Ethan Walker became much larger than either of them realized. Early the next morning, Lauren arrived at headquarters carrying a question she could not shake. The sealed document from the night before had revealed only a few visible lines before access disappeared, but those lines refused to leave her mind. Ethan Walker had once been listed as a lead contributor on a major infrastructure recovery project. Not a technician, not support staff, a lead contributor. The title alone contradicted everything she thought she knew. Across town, Ethan was dropping Lily off at school. Children hurried through the school hallway carrying backpacks nearly as large as they were. Lily smiled before heading toward her classroom. "Do not forget Parent Volunteer Day next week," she reminded him. Ethan laughed softly. "I would not miss it." He waited until she disappeared around the corner before heading toward his aging Ford pickup truck. His phone rang halfway to work. A facility emergency. By the time Ethan reached Kingsley Dynamics, tension had already spread through the building. A critical systems failure was threatening operations at one of the company's largest regional facilities. Conference rooms filled quickly. Engineers joined calls. Managers exchanged worried looks. Lauren entered the command room just as voices began talking over one another. Proposed solutions came rapidly. None seemed complete. Then someone quietly spoke from the back of the room. "You are solving the symptom, not the source." Every head turned toward Ethan. An uncomfortable silence followed. The same senior director who had doubted him before folded his arms. "And you know the source?" Ethan did not react to the challenge. Instead, he walked to the display screen and calmly pointed to several data patterns others had overlooked. He explained how a chain of small maintenance decisions made years earlier had gradually created the current vulnerability. His explanation was detailed, but simple enough for everyone to understand. More importantly, it fit every available piece of evidence. Lauren watched as experienced engineers stopped arguing and started listening. One engineer opened archived records. Another verified the numbers. 5 minutes later, confirmation arrived. Ethan was right. Again, the room became noticeably quieter. Not because anyone had been ordered to stop speaking, because they suddenly realized they were standing beside someone operating at a completely different level than they had assumed. Later that afternoon, Lauren found Ethan outside, near the employee mailbox area. Delivery trucks moved through the parking lot while workers headed toward lunch. "How did you know?" she asked. Ethan looked surprised. "Know what?" "The failure pattern." He hesitated. "I have seen similar situations before." "Where?" For a moment, something passed across his face. Not pride, not fear. More like an old memory he preferred to leave untouched. "A long time ago," he answered gently. Then he changed the subject and asked about the employees who might be affected if operations shut down. Laura noticed something important. Most people used knowledge to elevate themselves. Ethan used knowledge to protect others. That evening, on her way home, Lauren made a decision. Instead of stopping at her usual restaurant, she drove to a small diner near the edge of town after learning Ethan sometimes ate there with Lily. She arrived just in time to witness something unexpected. Ethan was helping a young waitress understand a community college scholarship application during a slow period between customers. He was explaining financial aid forms with the same patience he used when helping engineers solve technical problems. The waitress looked relieved. Ethan never mentioned his own struggles. He simply helped. Lauren remained unnoticed in her booth, watching quietly. The discovery changed something inside her. For the first time, she no longer saw a maintenance worker with unusual talents. She saw a man whose intelligence, dignity, and character had somehow been hidden in plain sight. But as she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed with a message from corporate legal. The sealed records she had attempted to access were not merely restricted. They had been intentionally protected years ago by someone at the highest level of the company. And attached to the message was a single sentence that made her heart skip. Ethan Walker had once walked away from a position most people would have spent their entire careers trying to reach. The message from corporate legal stayed with Lauren long after midnight. Ethan Walker had walked away from a position most professionals spent decades pursuing. Yet now he spent his mornings checking mechanical systems and stretching every dollar to support his daughter. The contradiction refused to make sense. The next day brought little time for reflection. Kingsley Dynamics faced growing pressure from clients after news of the regional facility vulnerability spread through industry circles. Investors wanted reassurance. Department heads demanded answers. Executives pushed for immediate solutions. Inside the headquarters conference room, tension hung heavier than the rain clouds gathering outside. Several teams spent hours debating competing recovery plans. Charts covered display screens. Forecasts filled spreadsheets. Yet every proposal seemed to create new risks somewhere else. Then Ethan quietly submitted a 3-page recommendation through normal internal channels. No presentación. No request for recognition. No attempt to claim authority. Just a practical solution. Most executives never even saw it. Lauren did. 2 hours later, she compared Ethan's recommendations against the competing plans. His approach would cost less, reduce downtime, and protect hundreds of jobs connected to the facility. What disturbed her was not that he found the answer. It was how quickly he found it. While entire departments struggled, Ethan had solved the problem between routine maintenance assignments. The results spread through the company faster than anyone expected. Employees began talking. Some admired him. Others grew suspicious. People often celebrate talent when it arrives with an impressive title. They become uncomfortable when it arrives wearing a maintenance badge. That afternoon, Ethan stopped at a grocery store after work. He carefully compared prices before placing milk, bread, and a few necessities into his cart. While waiting in line, he noticed a young father quietly removing items because his debit card had been declined. Without hesitation, Ethan paid the difference. The man tried to protest. Ethan simply smiled and said, "Take care of your family." Then he walked away before receiving thanks. He never noticed Lauren standing near the pharmacy counter several aisles away. Once again, she had witnessed something impossible to ignore. His competence was extraordinary. His character might be even rarer. Back at headquarters the following morning, another surprise emerged. Ethan's recovery plan was implemented on a limited trial basis. Within hours, performance metrics began improving exactly as he predicted. Engineers verified the results independently. Managers checked the numbers twice. Some even checked 3 times. Yet the outcome remained the same. Ethan had been right again. Questions multiplied throughout the building. Where did he learn these skills? Why was someone with this level of expertise working in maintenance? What was hidden inside those sealed records? Lauren found herself asking the same questions. Later that day, she received partial authorization to review a small section of Ethan's archived history. Most of the files remained protected. One paragraph, however, had been released. It described an internal crisis years earlier. A major operational failure had threatened the company. According to the report, one employee developed the solution that prevented catastrophic losses. The employee declined a promotion, refused public recognition, and requested anonymity. The name beneath the report made Lauren stop breathing for a moment. Ethan Walker. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Suddenly, dozens of disconnected pieces began fitting together. His technical knowledge, his leadership instincts, his refusal to seek credit, his quiet confidence. Yet before she could process the discovery, another message appeared. A new corporate review had been scheduled by senior leadership. Several executives were questioning Ethan's growing influence and demanding answers about his role. Lauren looked through the glass wall of her office toward the maintenance floor below. Ethan was helping a new employee learn a repair procedure, completely unaware of the storm gathering around him. And for the first time, Lauren realized that Ethan's greatest challenge might not be proving what he could do. It might be surviving what would happen when everyone else finally learned the truth. The corporate review was scheduled for Thursday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon, almost everyone at Kingsley Dynamics had heard some version of the rumor. Some believed Ethan Walker had hidden qualifications. Others claimed he had once worked in management. A few insisted the stories were exaggerated. The truth, however, was beginning to surface one piece at a time. Lauren spent most of the day reviewing newly released archive material. The files remained heavily restricted, but enough information had emerged to reshape everything she thought she knew. Years earlier, during one of the most difficult periods in company history, a cross-functional emergency task force had been assembled to prevent a catastrophic operational collapse. The reports repeatedly referenced a young systems strategist whose recommendations saved millions of dollars and protected hundreds of employees from losing their jobs. That strategist was Ethan Walker. More surprising still, several executives had recommended him for accelerated leadership development. Yet the records ended abruptly. No promotion, no public recognition, no explanation. Across town, Ethan was parked outside Lily's school in his aging pickup truck, waiting for classes to end. Parents gathered along the curb while children spilled into the afternoon sunlight. When one young boy dropped a box containing a science project, pieces scattered across the sidewalk. Ethan immediately stepped forward to help rebuild it before the child's mother arrived. The boy smiled with relief. Ethan never mentioned that he was running late himself. Small acts of grace came naturally to him. Inside Kingsley Dynamics, however, pressure continued building. During the corporate review, several executives openly questioned why someone with Ethan's background was working in maintenance. One executive suggested he had intentionally concealed his experience. Another implied he might have personal motives for staying close to operational systems. Lauren listened quietly until she could no longer ignore what she was hearing. "Every result we have verified supports his integrity," she said firmly. "If there is a concern, show evidence. If there is not, stop inventing reasons to doubt him." The room fell silent. It was the first time many executives realized how strongly Lauren's perspective had changed. Later that evening, she finally uncovered the missing piece. The answer arrived not through a corporate report, but through a handwritten letter preserved in an archived personnel file. Ethan had voluntarily withdrawn from the leadership track after his wife became seriously ill years earlier. Rather than pursue executive advancement, he chose flexible work assignments that allowed him to care for his family. The promotion disappeared. The title disappeared. The career trajectory disappeared. His responsibilities changed. His priorities changed. But his character never did. Lauren sat motionless as she finished reading. For the first time, the mystery became deeply personal. Ethan had not failed to achieve success. He had sacrificed it. The next morning, she stopped at the small diner she had visited before. The same waitress Ethan had helped with her scholarship application greeted her with excitement. "I got accepted into the program," she said. "Mr. Walker helped me finish everything." Lauren smiled. Another piece of the puzzle quietly clicked into place. Everywhere Ethan went, people seemed to move forward. Not because he demanded attention, because he gave it. Yet despite the growing respect surrounding him, resistance had not disappeared. Before Lauren returned to headquarters, she received an urgent message from senior leadership. An external audit team had discovered discrepancies connected to the old crisis Ethan helped solve years ago. Questions were being raised about decisions made during that period. Some executives now wanted Ethan formally investigated before any further recognition could occur. Lauren stared at the message while rain tapped softly against the diner's window. For months, Ethan had been underestimated. Now, just as the truth was finally emerging, a new shadow threatened to fall across everything he had built. And this time, the consequences could reach far beyond his reputation. The message from senior leadership spread through Kingsley Dynamics faster than any official announcement. An external audit had reopened questions about the crisis from years earlier, and Ethan Walker's name now appeared throughout the discussion. For some employees, the news felt impossible to believe. For others, it became an excuse to revive old suspicions. The timing could not have been worse. Just as respect was beginning to replace doubt, uncertainty returned. By Friday morning, Ethan noticed the change immediately. Conversations stopped when he entered certain rooms. People who once asked for his advice suddenly avoided eye contact. A few managers quietly reassigned projects connected to his recommendations. No accusations were spoken directly, but the distance was impossible to miss. Ethan accepted it with the same quiet dignity he carried through every hardship. Yet this time the weight felt heavier. Because the questions were no longer affecting only him. They were beginning to reach Lily. That afternoon, Ethan arrived at the school hallway for Parent Volunteer Day, something he had promised not to miss. Children filled the building with laughter and noise. Lily ran toward him with a smile, but the smile faded when she noticed his expression. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked softly. Ethan forced a reassuring smile. "Everything is fine." But children often hear what adults try to hide. During the event, Ethan noticed two parents whispering after recognizing his name from company gossip circulating online. They said nothing directly, yet Lily heard enough to understand that people were questioning her father. The hurt in her eyes struck Ethan harder than any professional criticism ever could. On the drive home in his old pickup truck, neither of them spoke much. Rain tapped against the windshield while traffic crawled through town. Ethan kept both hands on the steering wheel and focused on the road. Lily stared out the passenger window. Finally, she asked the question he feared most. "Did you do something wrong?" Silence filled the cab for several seconds. "No, hice nada serdiently." "Then why do people act like you did?" Ethan had no easy answer. That night, after Lily fell asleep, he sat alone at the kitchen table beside an unpaid utility bill and a stack of school papers. The house felt unusually quiet. Across town, Lauren was fighting a different battle. She spent hours reviewing audit documents and archived records, searching for anything that justified the growing suspicion. Instead, she found the opposite. Every verified document pointed toward Ethan helping the company, protecting employees, and refusing personal gain. Yet the audit team remained focused on one missing piece of evidence. A key decision from years earlier lacked supporting documentation. Without it, they claimed they could not fully clear his involvement. The missing record became the center of everything. Monday morning brought another blow. Senior leadership placed Ethan on temporary administrative leave while the review continued. The decision was described as procedural, but its impact was deeply personal. Employees watched as Ethan quietly turned in his access badge. No anger, no argument, no attempt to defend himself. Just grace under pressure. Even Lauren felt powerless as she watched him leave the building. Later that day, Ethan stopped at a small church parking lot to clear his thoughts before going home. He noticed an elderly man struggling with a flat tire and immediately offered help. For nearly an hour, he worked in the cold drizzle until the tire was replaced. The man thanked him repeatedly. Ethan simply wished him safe travels and drove away. Even in his lowest moment, he remained exactly who he had always been. That evening, Lauren returned to her office after everyone else had gone home. One final archive request had been approved. Buried inside a forgotten storage database, a newly recovered file appeared on her screen. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. The document contained the complete record of the crisis that had changed Ethan's life years ago. And on the final page was a revelation so significant that it could either destroy the accusations against him forever or expose a truth no one at Kingsley Dynamics was prepared to face. Lauren stared at the screen in stunned silence as the pieces finally began to fall into place. Lauren remained in her office long after sunset, staring at the recovered file that had finally surfaced from the forgotten archive. The missing document was not a technical report. It was a complete record of the crisis that had threatened Kingsley Dynamics years earlier. As she read page after page, the truth emerged with startling clarity. Ethan Walker had not merely contributed to the solution. He had led it. When a series of disastrous decisions from senior leadership placed hundreds of jobs at risk, Ethan developed the recovery strategy that saved the company from collapse. More importantly, he had discovered errors made by executives whose careers would have been destroyed if exposed publicly. Yet instead of protecting himself, he chose to protect everyone involved. He refused credit. He refused promotion. He requested that his name be removed from public records. Then, when his wife became ill, he stepped away from the leadership track entirely and accepted a position that allowed him to care for his family. He had sacrificed status, income, and opportunity without ever telling anyone why. The next morning, senior leadership assembled for a final review. Executives filled the conference room. Audit representatives sat along one side of the table. Ethan arrived quietly after being asked to attend. He wore the same work shirt he had worn for years. No expensive suit, no prepared speech, no attempt to defend himself. Lauren entered carrying the recovered file. The room settled into uneasy silence. One executive began discussing procedural concerns. Another referenced unresolved questions. Then Lauren placed the document on the table. "There are no unresolved questions," she said calmly. Every eye turned toward her. For nearly 20 minutes, she walked through the evidence. The records, the recommendations, the timeline, the decisions, the sacrifices. One by one, every accusation collapsed. The audit team confirmed the findings. The missing document proved that Ethan had protected the company, protected employees, and protected leaders who never even knew what he had done for them. Then Lauren read one final passage from the archived record. It contained Ethan's own written request from years earlier. He declined promotion because his family needed him more than a title. He requested anonymity because preserving jobs mattered more than personal recognition. And he asked that the company focus on rebuilding rather than celebrating him. When Lauren finished reading, the room went silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of suspicion. The deeper silence that comes when people realize they have completely misunderstood someone. Several executives lowered their eyes. Others stared at Ethan in disbelief. The senior director who had questioned him repeatedly looked unable to speak. For months, they had searched for hidden motives. The truth was far simpler. Ethan had been acting with integrity all along. Lauren finally looked toward him. "The company owes you an apology." Ethan shook his head gently. People make decisions based on what they know. The answer somehow made the silence even heavier. Later that afternoon, Ethan stopped by Lily's school to pick her up. Children rushed through the school hallway while parents waited near the entrance. This time, however, something felt different. Several people who had once whispered now approached him openly. They thanked him. They shook his hand. They treated him with the respect that should have been there from the beginning. Lily noticed everything. "They know the truth now?" she asked as they walked toward the pickup truck. Ethan smiled. "I guess they do." She wrapped her arms around him before he could open the driver's door. "I always knew." For a moment, Ethan could not speak. Across town, Lauren made one final decision. She offered Ethan a senior leadership role built around the same strategic strengths he had demonstrated for years. This time, however, there would be flexibility for his responsibilities as a father. Ethan did not answer immediately. He asked for time to think, not because he doubted his ability, because every important decision in his life began with the same question: what was best for Lily? A week later, he accepted, not for status, not for recognition, but because it gave him a chance to help more people while remaining the father he wanted to be. That evening, after stopping at the grocery store and checking the mailbox on the way home, Ethan sat on the front porch while the sun disappeared behind the neighborhood rooftops. Lily worked on homework beside him. For the first time in a long while, the future felt steady. Lauren's message arrived shortly before sunset. It was simple. "Thank you for showing us what leadership actually looks like." Ethan read the message and smiled quietly. The world had finally seen what had always been there. Not a maintenance worker pretending to be more. Not a forgotten expert seeking recognition. Just a father who chose dignity over attention, responsibility over ambition, and grace over resentment. In the end, the respect he earned did not come from titles or authority. It came from character. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who never asked to be noticed at all.